Drywall repairman here. We're just going to do a simple video on doing some patchwork in a bathroom wall and a bathroom ceiling. This has a smooth texture, so we're just going to follow along here. I'm not going to do too much talking. It's just basically watch and learn type video. I also did some key cards on here on some of the steps that need to be done. But basically just watch through the video and see how we do it. On this job I have some help. I'm working with my buddy on his job, so we're just helping each other here. Let's do some drywall. So yeah, your first thing you want to do on these projects, always put down plastic, tarps, something to catch your mess. On this patch, they just cut it out however they wanted to have access to run their plumbing pipes. So as drywallers, we need to come in and measure the area. We want to cut out a nice square area. Always mark both sides of your patch so you get an equal cutout. On this, he's doing a new technique. I like this technique using a chalk line. So you just mark your area, and then from your second mark, just snap your chalk line. This is an efficient way on stuff like this. You could also use a T-square, level, anything just to cut it out. We're working together in this small room, so just getting it done. So he's going ahead and marking his stud halfway on the stud. As he's working on that, I'm going to scrape this loose stuff on the wall. Try to keep busy, both of us here in this small room, so we both have to work. My buddy here, he's using a sawzall to cut it out. A lot of people like to use sawzalls. You can also use a razor blade, keyhole saw, any type of saw. You just want to be careful not to cut too deep because you don't know what's behind the sheetrock. You can hit a pipe. So he's just setting his sawzall blade in about less than a ½ inch. Cuts out the area. Now he has a nice area to hang a nice square piece of sheetrock on. He's pulling all of his nails. Usually the older homes, they use nails instead of screws. If you have screws, take out your screws. You want to double check everything. Make sure everything's clean, cut out. Once you get all the screws and nails pulled out, you're going to want to have to always put screws on your outside edge. You always want to tighten up your old wall. Cutting out this patch will loosen up your existing sheetrock, so you always put screws on the outside edge. This also helps mark the studs, so now you know where the studs are. You could also pencil the studs. Keep a piece of your cutout. If you keep a piece of your cutout, you can use that for the paint match. I always cut out a piece of drywall and give to the homeowners so they have a paint match. Sometimes you think you have a paint match and then you go to paint and you realize you don't have it and the drywall is long gone. So always keep a piece of the drywall, demo piece if possible, for your paint matching. Go through and add all your screws. You also want to add backing. This is a good time to add extra framing, backing. Use 1x2s, 2x2s, 2x4s, whatever you have. Just add plenty of backing. This tightens up your sheetrock, so when you put your new sheet of drywall in, it's nice and tight. You don't want a wobbling piece of sheetrock. Also, if you add that framing, the new sheetrock and the old sheetrock will butt up against each other and be nice and level. If you don't put backing in, it's going to be loose, not level, and it turns into a big job, and it might stress crack later on down the road. Mark your studs, get everything screwed in, add your backing, then you take your measurements. Take your measurements for your patches. Always check both sides of your patches to make sure that this side's the same as this side. If they change, then take the bigger measurement and then you can cut it down after you get the sheetrock inside. He's using 1x2 backings. These are easy to work with. Some guys like to use 2x4s, whatever it takes, but you just want to add extra backing. This makes a nice strong patch area. Get everything ready for sheetrock and then go ahead and measure and cut your sheetrock. This is a bathroom, so we're going to go ahead and use a mold resistant green board. It's not necessarily to use green board Most of the time they just use it on plumbing walls, but since we had some extra green board, we're going to go ahead and use it on this bathroom patch job. Some guys like to do the ceiling first and then add the wall patch in second. This is at an angle here, off angle. So he's taking his measurement from the one side and then the other side and doing a chalk line. This is an easy way of doing this, or you could try to piece it in, but it's easier to chalk line it. You're never going to be right on the money, but see how he just did it with this chalk line. It's an easy technique to get these vaulted ceiling angle patches like this. He's also turning around and using a rasp. He's rasping his cut edge of drywall to get all the boogers and goobers out of there to make a nice straight piece. Also, if you have pipes in the wall, you want to mark your pipes. They should have brackets in the framing, so if you did put a screw through accidentally, you hit pipe. But sometimes you need to mark your pipes so you remember where they are, or take a picture before you put screws in. This is a 1/2 inch sheetrock, so we're just using 1 1/4 inch sheetrock screws. Get it plenty of screws put in. Make sure you have screws on the outside edge. Nice tight patch. We don't want a wobbling loose patch. This is the proper way of hanging a sheetrock patch. Other guys may say they have different ideas and different ways, but this is the way we do it, and we know. Once you get everything taped, double check your work area. Now it's time for our first coat. I'm using a quick set mud. If you've never done drywall before, you've limited jobs that you practice on, go ahead and just use a joint compound. Joint compounds you have to let dry overnight, coat it, let it dry again overnight, then do a second coat. With these quick set muds, I do these because I work with muds every day, so I know how to work with the muds, stuff like that. So you're going to just see the process of working with the quick set mud. This is an actual 5-minute mud. So I'm putting on a whole pan of mud. My buddy mixed up a second one right behind me, so we're just running through 2. Some guys might mix a 1/4 bucket of mud, 1/2 bucket of mud, but sometimes it's easier just to mix a couple pans, especially when you have help like this. I didn't have to go outside and mix up another one. My buddy's now going to leave and go wash up that pan while I put on the second pan. I'm just doing a nice heavy coat. Quick set muds are like joint compounds, but you don't have to put them on as heavy. Joint compounds are put on a little heavier because they are going to shrink back overnight. Quick set muds, however you put the mud on is how it's going to be. So you don't want a big old hump of mud on the wall or on your patch. So you fairly put a little more pressure because you just want a nice skimmed out patch. And just controlling the mud flow and all that, that's just experience working with knives and muds all the time. You're not going to just pick up a knife and pan and think you're the Picasso of mudding. It is an art. Sometimes it's easier when in doubt. Just skim it out. That's a saying. Because it's easier to add another coat than it is to try to get rid of a big hump on the wall. If you create a big hump on the wall, now you have a problem. You can see that hump. So sometimes it's easier to do tighter coat process. Nice tight first coat, nice tight second coat, nice tight third coat. If it's deep, hey, I can do a third or fourth coat if need be. But once you got a hump on the wall, it's a lot of work to get rid of that hump. Now you got to float out the area around it to get rid of a small hump that you created by putting too much mud on the wall. But I'm just coating all the areas, coating the patches, the tape, taking it out, trying to clean up the angle here, just doing a nice first coat. If this was a joint compound, you'd go ahead and clean up your tools and just let this set up overnight. Joint compounds, you'd have to turn around and sand between coats. But with these quick set muds, we put the material on, and as it sets up, then we work with the muds called slick out technique. Slick out techniques used on a lot of my videos on my channel. Like I said, if you're not comfortable using muds, you're not more of an intermediate professional drywaller, you shouldn't be using quick set muds, because you have to mix them. They dry, they almost set up like a cement, they set up like a rock. So you want to make sure you know what you're doing when you're mixing quick set muds. Quick set muds include 5-minute, 20-minute, 40-minute, and 90-minute mud. Sometimes I've seen guys, they'll mix just regular joint compound, and they might sprinkle some of the quick set muds in it just to help the job along. You can do this too, but I just either mix regular joint compounds or I mix hot muds. I don't like to mix both of them. Once the mud sets up, like this is a 5-minute mud, it sets up between 4 to 6 minutes. As it's setting up, you have to catch it before it dries. If it dries completely, you're in trouble. So you got to catch it as it's setting up. And then you're working it. It's almost like if you ever worked with cement or work with clay. It's pretty much the same technique. As the material's starting to set up, you're taking water damp sponge and you're slicking it out with your 6-inch knife. This is basically taking off the extra mud, slicking it out. It's filling in any missed areas. It's almost like a tight second coat when you do the slick out process. But you have to do this process before the mud sets up. I know you read the bag and it says easy sandable material on the quick sets, but I've never in my 25 years of drywall ever had to sand hot muds, because I catch them as you set up. You have to catch them as they set up and do the slick out process. If other people are showing you different methods of working with hot muds besides the slick out, I would really like to know what they're doing. Maybe they know something I don't know. But this is how I do it. I am a licensed drywaller. I know there's a lot of critics on YouTube, keyboard warriors. Everybody knows everything, but I am an actual drywaller. I work in the field in one of the biggest cities in the country. I stay plenty of busy. I have a little bit of time to make YouTube videos, but yeah, I am a worker, and this is how I do the drywall repair process. Bigger jobs, I use joint compounds, but these one-trip jobs, I have to finish them in one trip because I can't keep driving across the cities, several cities, to go back to these jobs. 2 trips, 3 trips, 4 trips. So that's why I use these quick set muds. We're just slicking it out, taking your time, getting all the extra mud out. And then you're basically going to do the same process for a second coat. But this time, the second coat, it's a little thinner mud, and we're just going to do a tight skim coat for the second coat. And we always go past our first coat with our second coat, get everything second coated, and then we're going to let it set up. Same process as the first coat. Once it sets up, the second coat sets up, we're going to slick it out. You have to do this between each coat. It makes a nice, perfect coat. This is the second time I'm slicking this out. You can also slick out, go in the opposite direction of your coat, clean up your angles. You always have to have a damp sponge, and you also have to have a nice, straight, clean 6-inch knife. Clean up your angles. You're going to have to get all this area because our next coat is going to be a third coat. I always recommend maybe 3 coats for a beginner on drywall. You just do a nice tight second coat, nice tight third coat. If it's still deep, maybe even do a 4th coat. But I do 2 coats with this hot mud, and after I slick it out, it's almost like a 4th coat on it after you slick it out nice. It's really nice material to work with if you know how to work with it. We're just manipulating, taking off the extra material, just slicking it out. I'm getting this whole area slicked out, getting it ready for my next coat. My next coat's going to be done with joint compound. It's more of a tight skim coat texture. This is just a smooth wall in here. It's not a level 5 smooth wall or nothing. It's just a regular skim coat, 3-coat job. Tight skim coat with a joint compound. I'm going to feather all my edges. Always feather your edges with your sponge. The edge is where the new mud work meets the old wall. You want to feather in this edge. That way you don't see a sharp mud edge when you go to mud. Just get everything feathered out, wiped down, cleaned up, make it look nice. Basically, after I slick it out like this, if I paint the walls, is it going to be perfect? Yes? Okay, move on to the next step. Texture. A lot of guys think texture hides imperfections. Texture is just a top coat, cosmetic. So that's how I gauge my jobs. If I paint it now, would it be a perfect patch? Yes? Okay, I'm going to texture it now. No? Okay, I'm going to have to add another coat before my texture. So it's an easy way of looking at it. Just if you want to be a perfectionist, just get a nice patch. We don't want to do all this work, make all this mess, working with waters, working with muds, just to have a bad job. So just take your time. This is a hot muds that I'm working with. Like I said, if you never worked with hot muds or rarely worked with regular muds, just stick to your joint compounds. At least with the joint compound, if you do make a mistake, you can just wait till it dries and sand away your mistakes. These hot muds are not so forgiving. They're called hot muds because they set up chemically. Once you add water, you have a time limit to use it, and it sets up like a rock once the hot mud, they call it hot because the chemical reaction starts to necessarily not get hot, but it does get a little warm because you're having a chemical reaction. I got all this slicked out, so I'm going to go ahead and caulk in the angles. This is a good time to caulk in angles. Either do it now before you texture with a hand texture, or you can do it after everything dries, after you sand it, before you do your primer and painting. With these hand textures, I always caulk before I paint. With spray type textures, you can't caulk before you spray. If you do, the caulking has to be dry, because if you sprayed over caulking, wet caulking, it will crack out. So I'm just doing a tight beat of caulking in these angles to make a perfect angle. Perfect, perfect, perfect. A lot of guys won't go through this much trouble, but hey, we have the time and the customer wants a good job, so that's what we'll give them. Get everything ready, prepped, cleaned up, everything looks good. When everything looks good, then I know I'm ready to go outside and get my other mud for my next step process. I do a lot of the muds myself. My buddy here, he knows how to mud, but it's easier to just have one guy do the mudding in a small area like this. If there's a big job, the whole bathroom, then we both would probably be mudding and just trying to get it done. Smaller area like this, it's more like having an assistant to help you while one guy muds. And our job is more of a hurry up and wait type job, waiting for the muds to set up, just working with the materials as it sets up. Caulk everything up, everything looks nice and clean, wipe down, mess. You can also clean as you go. It's a good time to clean as you go so there ain't such a big mess tracking across the house. So keep the work area as clean as possible. Alright, the job's moving along quickly. So now I went and got a pan of joint compound. It's a thinner joint compound. I'm just doing a tight skim coat. I'm using a 12-inch knife. And I'm just doing a skim coat. I'm just like to put my mud on. I always go past my coats. Each coat goes further and wider than the previous coat. Basically, that covers your mistakes. It helps feather in the patch further, wider, makes a nice patch. There's some detail here. The detail I call is the vent and stuff like that. So I'm going to just take the texture right to the edge of the vent. It helps blend, transition the patchwork and better. I'm also going to take it all the way to the angle. So there ain't just a big patch in the center of the ceiling. It's basically going to be this whole area of the ceiling that's refinished. The tight skim coat. I'm just putting on the mud. It is thin. You may drop some mud. That's why we keep plastic on the floor. It is a messy process. You just got to take your time. Like I said, these videos, you can watch all my videos and you start to see that the mudding process looks easy, but I've been doing this forever. Even I'm not the best mud guy. There's guys out there that'll work circles around you. But this is the jobs we do. This is what I'm comfortable doing with. I don't like to do big projects because I work on those big projects. I seem to never make any money. If I do make money, I end up working 60 hours a week. So that's why we do these projects. These projects are stuff you can do yourself. It's the most common repairs in anybody's home, apartment, condo, basic repairs like this. Everybody gets them at least once in their home life. They meet a drywaller or they have to have a drywall repair done in their home. I just like to start on the ceiling. That way, if you started on the wall and then you started on the ceiling second, you would drop mud on your wall. So we always start on our ceilings. I'm just taking this all the way to the angle. Tight skim coats. I'm not putting this mud on super heavy. The first coat and second coat are already done. I don't need to coat it anymore. This is just basically a finishing process of the coat mud. The other coat muds I used were a hot mud. They're a little rougher, coarser mud. I'm using a thinned down joint compound. These joint compounds, once you mix them up, it's like cream on it. Nice, tight, clean, perfect patch once you do a tight skim coat over it with joint compounds. This is not a perfect smooth wall house, but it is a smooth wall skim job. So like I said, we did 2 coats. And our third coat's a tight skim with a joint compound. Going past my work to the angles. I'm just trying to stay out of the angles though, because I caulked them before, remember? So you don't want to put that knife up in the angle. You just want to stay off of it. And that's kind of tricky, especially if you have a twitchy hand and you're working with these tools. Just me, it's just years of doing it, you know, just steady hand, taking my time. Especially working with these sharp knives. You don't want to rush. You want to take your time, know what you're doing. A lot of guys carry around a bunch of different knives. I got a 6, I got an 8, I got a 10-inch, 12-inch, 14-inch, 16-inch, 18-inch, 20-inch, 24-inch. The only knives you need for drywall, for basic stuff, just a 6-inch knife and a 12-inch knife. Trust me, those 2 knives alone will do pretty much everything you need to do. You're going to buy a bunch of knives and you're no good at one of them. So you want to master one knife before you upgrade to the next size up. So a good coating knife with a 12-inch knife, you can get away with doing your first coat, your second coat, your skimming. It's an easier knife to control. Once you get into 14-inch knife, 20-inch knife, you got to know knife control. So a good 12-inch knife and a good 6-inch knife will last you a long time. Those are the only 2 knives you really need. But I'm taking this patch work past my area, so it's a nice blend-in transition. All the work that ran down the wall, I'm filling all that in. Nice coat. This joint compound has to dry overnight. Always let joint compounds set up overnight. You're going to let it dry overnight, and then you'll be in good shape. After you're done skimming it out, you go ahead and clean up all your tools, put all your stuff away, make sure everything's nice and clean. A lot of guys want to leave the plastic up overnight because they say, hey, I'm going to be painting, so I'm just going to leave the plastic. No, you just pull everything out, clean everything up, wipe everything down, clean, fresh, brand new. Tomorrow's another day. Tomorrow we're going to start with new masking materials and stuff. You want to just get all that mud dirtiness out of there, and then you can start fresh the next day with nice plastic and masking materials on the floor. You're just going to let this set up overnight. You necessarily don't have to turn around and primer and paint it the next day, but at least give it a day or thereafter before you do your painting process. The painting process after this might include sanding. Sandpaper includes like a sanding block, a fine and medium sanding block, or sandpaper or sand poles at 150 grit to a 220 grit sandpaper are perfect for finish sanding drywall textures. Sometimes you don't even need to sand it, but most textures you need to sand them to get perfection. Perfection, perfection, perfection. After you sand it, then you're going to also have to use a primer. Always use a primer, PVA drywall sealer, or Kills before paint. Always, always, always is a must, must, must. Use a primer before paint. Hey, I hope this video is helpful. Please subscribe and like. I have plenty more videos coming this way. Channel's growing, and thank you for watching.